You want to keep your Bibles open there to Judges 17. We're going to begin the process this evening of wrapping up the book of Judges. And we've been studying in this book for about a year now as we have looked at these key figures in the life of Israel, these deliverers that came in and Maybe we were tempted to say they kind of came in and saved the day. They were rescuers. I hope that through the course of the study, we've kind of grown to a place where the judges don't have such a shiny appeal to them. Maybe if you're like me, we've kind of come back looking at the judges saying, what's going on in Israel? To crank out, these are the heroes of Israel, and they're not really that great. There's a lot of character flaw in these guys that have arisen through these stories. And that's really what the end of the book of Judges is going to set out to do. It's going to set out to tell you what's actually going on in Israel. It's a thematic shift that takes place here at the end in chapter 17, where the narrator is no longer interested in telling you about these deliverers that have been raised up or raised themselves up at time to lead Israel. Rather, it's going to talk about the nation itself, specifically two key parts of the nation and how they were living at the time, which gives us a picture of exactly the problems that we are seeing and dealing with within the nation. Key to all of that is going to be a statement that will be repeated more times here at the end of the book than anywhere else. And that is the idea that there is no king in Israel. There is no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. 4 times in these last 5 chapters, that statement is going to be made. It becomes an inclusio of sorts to kind of book in the accounts that we'll be looking at. 2 accounts particularly, chapter 17 and 18. And then the next time we wrap the book up, chapters 19, 20, and 21. But both of these 2 accounts stand out as demonstrating what life is like living without a king. And the first part of that is going to have to do with religion and with worship. And the second half of that is going to have to do with morality and ethics. But both of these 2 accounts are shaping this picture of what it looks like when there is no longer any king in the land, which some have pointed to say that the narrator is writing this as an apologetic for the kinghood in the days of that becomes established in the days of Samuel. You might recall towards the beginning of the book of Samuel, around chapter 7, the people say, we want a king like the nations around us. It seems like a great failure. It is in many ways a great failure. But the narrator of the book of Judges seems to be indicating it's better than what we had. And certainly as we look at some of the things that we'll see in these closing chapters, that appears at least to be the case. I'm not sure that is the right takeaway that we should get from this. So what we'll be seeing tonight is that when there is no king, there is no righteousness in the land. The idea that will be here will be looking at an event involving the tribe of Dan. It's a tribe we don't spend a whole lot of time talking and thinking about. In fact, when we get to the book of Revelation, he's going to be completely left out of the list of tribes altogether. We might have an idea as to why that happens beginning here in Judges. In both of the accounts, the second one will involve the tribe of Benjamin. In both the accounts, we're also going to see an anonymous Levite. Now, we'll get a name for our Levite after a while, but we'll start off with an anonymous Levite. They will have ties to Judah and to Bethlehem. We will see people who are inquiring of God and asking for God's advice in certain situations. And the things that I just mentioned, they should prime us to say, well, that sounds like things are going well in Israel. People that are looking to the Levites and they're asking for God's assistance. But again, we're going to highlight this phrase on the board behind me. The narrator wants us to know nothing good is about to come from what we're about to read. The first account that we'll look at tonight may be, or I should say, before I say that, I mentioned that it might be that they're trying to give an apology for the kings in Israel. It might also be that the narrator is trying to draw another fact out. And that is that in the days of the judges, shortly after the conquest of Canaan has concluded, Israel completely abandons the covenant that they have with God. In Deuteronomy 33 and verse 5, it says that the Lord became king in Jeshurun when the head of the people were gathered together, all the tribes of Israel together. When Moses is giving the law again, he is in many ways, especially in Deuteronomy, illustrating that Israel is entering into this form of relationship where they recognize a king of greater power that they will submit themselves to, they will rely upon him in times of trouble, and they will obey his every command. The concept is a bit of a term called a suzerain relationship, and we see it in other cases in ancient times as well. Egypt would have done this. Babylon would have done this. They would have said, you can remain a kingdom, but we're the main power. We're who you get your instructions from. And in some ways, God was doing this. I'm going to make you a kingdom of priests. You're going to be a nation that is going to have its own political structure, but you belong to me. And you're going to follow me, and you're going to rely on me. And it may be that when we read that phrase, there is no king in Israel, it may be that the narrator is trying to point out just how Israel has completely abandoned and turned their back on God. And I think that starts to stand out right away in chapter 17. But a few things to consider about the way that religion has become sort of rogue and the wild, wild west of sorts in Israel at this time. We get introduced to a couple characters, but when you really stop and think about them, it's kind of dizzying trying to keep track of their aspects. Are they good characters or are they bad characters? And there's certainly some things to be said about some of the good things that we see in them. For starters, the first name that we learn in chapter 17 is the name Micah. Micah, who is like Yahweh. That seems like certainly a good name to have, right? That's a name that you would want to have. That's a good name. So we would expect a character like that to be someone who represents God in good ways and have someone who has named him that, who has a high regard for Jehovah and the things that he has commanded. Through verses 1 through 4, his name is quite literally in the Hebrew. It would be Mihayah. That's the way it's written. That's the way that the narrator records it. And it's translated Micah. But there's an abbreviated version of that drops Yahweh's name from it completely. And what's interesting is he introduces us to Micah with that proper name, Mihayah. Mihayah had a mother. Mihayah stole some silver. Mihayah gave it back to her. But after chapter 4, or verse 4, he never refers to him like that again. We don't notice that in our English translations because it is still translated Micah. But he drops the Yah at the end, and his name from there on out, he refers to him as just Miha. Miha did this, Miha did that. And it kind of leaves the reader wondering, well, why would we all of a sudden, as we're telling the story, separate this figure from the name of Yahweh? He does have some initial points that make us think he's going to be a good guy. He seems penitent. He's done something wrong, yes, but he's trying to make it up. He's taking it back to his mom, the silver that he has stolen. However, it's not because he feels bad about what he's done. It's because he heard her utter a curse, and that scared him. He heard her curse, whoever stole my 1,100 pieces of silver. So he returns it to her, not out of remorse, but out of fear. But then the mom takes it back and says, you know what? I don't want you to be cursed. So she's going to offer a blessing to him and say, I'm going to devote this to Yahweh. Well, that would make sense. She did name her son, who is like Yahweh. But then she turns around, instead of taking it to, at this time, Shiloh, would have been where she would have taken it, and giving it to the priests that served before the Lord, she goes and finds a silversmith. And she doesn't give him all 1,100 pieces. She only gives him 200 pieces, which I think I did my math right. That's like 18%. That's not even a quarter of what she promised to give to God. She only gives this very small amount, and then she uses it to do something that God has expressly forbidden. Create a graven image and create a molten image. Now, the first time you might in your mind draw back to the book of Exodus, at Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments, God said, you're going to have no graven images. But sometime between Sinai and going into the kingdom of Canaan, God gathers them together under Moses, and He gives them a second giving of the law. And it appears that somebody during that time said, okay, we can't carve any images, but can we make one out of metal? And so God has to kind of update the law at that point and says, no, you can't do graven images, and you can also not do molten images. I think the point being is, I don't care what form you're doing this in, you shouldn't do it. But the key is here, she's violated both of those. She's found a way to take the two very things that God has said and say, I'm going to do the opposite of that. And then we learn that she gives those to Micah, and Micah has at his house his very own shrine. The Hebrew word there is bayith, and we normally find that. It's throughout the Bible as just saying the house of. But in this context, connected to the idea of worship and religion, it is the idea of a temple. In fact, when we think of the house of God, the bayith of God, we're talking about the temple eventually in Jerusalem. Well, that's what Micah has established at his house. I have a house of worship. It will be referred to as the bayith of Micah, the house of Micah. But this is where his religion that he is about to create at this moment, in some way which he thinks is glorifying to God, and his mom seems to think is glorifying to God, is going to be established. He's going to make an ephod. That's like a type of dress that's going to go along with this. He's going to install idols. He's going to take his son and say, guess what, son? You're a priest now, and put him in charge of things here. So not only is this a picture now of a worship center, and I think we would refer to it specifically in this context as kind of a cultic worship center, but it's also a direct link to the idea of prophecy. Whenever you had a question and you wanted God's answer, you would go to the priest. They would get their attire, they would have their tools, the Urim and the Thummim, and you would be able to ask God, and He would give answers as to what how you should move forward, or whether or not a plan was going to be successful or not. So He's taking things that He is recognizing from true commandments of God. This is what it's supposed to look like, but here's the problem. He's completely paganizing it. And so the religion of Israel at this time, at least as we see it from the lens of this man Micah in the hill country of Ephraim, which, by the way, I mentioned Shiloh earlier. Shiloh is in Ephraim. They are right there. Where do you think he probably got all these ideas from? What he saw going on in his own country. So in the heart, the religious heart of the people of God, you have this guy that says, I can do that, but I'm going to make some small tweaks to things. I'm going to change things around a little bit. I don't think we should come to this and not think that they're not sincere. I don't think we should come to this and not think that they just are flippant in what they're doing. I believe they're very sincere in their actions, but we can very easily see how far off the rails from what God has commanded they are establishing this great apostatized religion. They're a perfect picture of Israel. And they're also a perfect picture of all who would take religious expression but drown it in I would say paganism, but we might not think of that today exactly the same. But when we take what God has created and we start to twist it, and we start to change it, and we start to mold it in ways that we like, we're doing exactly what Micah was guilty of doing. We're shaping worship and fashioning it after ourselves. And I think we'll be able to see that a little bit more as we go on. Now, as we would continue on through the story, in verses 7 through 13, we get introduced to another character. And again, he has some things that seem good about him, but also some things that we stand out and go, This can't be what God wants. He's a young man who's from Bethlehem in Judah, but he's a Levite. And he seems to kind of just be traveling about, living life for wherever it might take him. I'm just going to wherever, he says, I'm just looking that I might find a place, wherever I might stay. He's the kind of guy that's just sort of out drifting through life and so happens to come into contact with this guy Micah. And Micah, for his part, starts kind of going, hey, I've got a priest, but I don't have a Levite priest. And so he approaches him with this offer, which is essentially, I'm going to give you a salary, I'm going to give you a housing and clothing budget, and you're going to become a father and a priest to me. And now, that phrase father probably simply just means a counselor. You're going to be the guy that gives me advice. Remember, we're fashioning a lot of this off of the priesthood in Shiloh. When I have questions about what I need to do, I'll come to you. But it also could indicate that there's not a strong father figure in Micah's life. When we're introduced to him, we're not introduced to a father. We're introduced to him and his mother. And so it could show us that the fathers in Israel are not leading the way that they should be leading as well. But either way, he says, you're going to be a father and a priest to me. And the Levite, for his part, seems to think, hey, that's really cool. I'm going to go join in with that. And he's not entirely wrong in what he's doing. Again, I said there's things about this that seem right. If you go back to Deuteronomy for a moment, Deuteronomy 18, verses 6 through 9. During the giving of the law again, God speaks through Moses about some of the rules of the Levites. He says, if a Levite comes from any of your towns throughout Israel where he resides, and he comes whenever he desires, to the place which the Lord chooses, then he shall serve in the name of the Lord his God, like his fellow Levites who stand there before the Lord. They shall eat equal portions, except what they have received from the sale of their father's estate. When you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable things of those nations. So back then, God was telling them, it's not going to be unheard of for Levites who don't have land. You got to recall, the Levites are not given a portion of land. They are the Lord's portion. They belong to Him as an inheritance. They have some cities, but they are many times going to travel about. And he said there might be a Levite who comes to you and he's going to serve in your city in some way, just like the Levites that are serving before the Lord in Shiloh. He's going to be doing the very same things, and it's going to be just like them. God approved of that. But a few differences. In that case, God said, I'm going to be the one that shows them where they're going to go. Whereas here, the Levite that we're looking at says, I'm just going to see where the world takes me. I'm just going to go on a stroll and see where I land. Wherever I am, that's where I'll be. He also tells them very specifically in verses 1 through 5 of that same reading, things that they could expect when they came into these cities. And it is nothing like what goes on with him and Micah and this idea of being hired to do this work. It's very different from what actually takes place. Whatever goes on, though, it is reflectant of the phrase that we've already seen in the reading. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes. Micah's looking for a place, or Micah has created a religion that's right in his own eyes. But this Levite is just looking for a place that's right in his own eyes. Whatever sounds good. Wherever I go, if it's a good place, I'll just stay there. But something that's kind of startling is at the end of chapter 18, we're going to get a name for this Levite. And the name is one that probably doesn't jump out at us right away and go, oh, I know exactly who that is. His name is Jonathan. His father's name, depending on your translation, is either Manasseh, which is just one little jot or tittle away from Moses. I should say his father is Gershom. His grandfather is Manasseh or Moses. It could be that the narrator purposefully changes the name of Moses here to try and avoid connecting Moses with the awful things that are about to take place. Very, very likely that we're looking at someone who is very closely connected to Moses and Aaron and the things that went on in the wilderness and all the things that God has done and all the things that God has said, and yet now is walking very opposed to the ways that he had commanded. But we would also maybe note from that then that if he's Moses' grandson, we have a big problem. Because the priests couldn't come from Moses. The priests had to come from Aaron. So we got the wrong brother putting a grandson who's going to go out into the world doing the wrong things and being established as the wrong sort of priest in the very wrong sort of religion. But it all ends in verse 13. Before we look and see where it takes us next, I want to draw out the last thing that we read before we move on. Verse 13, you have these words of Micah. Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, seeing I have a Levite as a priest. Micah has set out to establish this priesthood, which, by the way, we don't really learn about it, but he had a priest, his son. I guess he got the boot. I don't know if he just got fired or what. You're out. I found this guy in the marketplace. He's in. But you kind of get this sense where he's trying to legitimize himself, right? I'm bona fide. I got a priesthood. I got a Levite. I'm doing things the right way. Everybody should recognize that I am creating something that is legitimate. And because of that, I expect that God's going to do good things for me. We have seen up to this point the way that the judges of Israel have, in some cases, tried to manipulate God to do things for them, make things happen to their advantage. But what we're learning here is Israel doesn't need a leader in that. Israel can do that all on their own. They're very adept at trying to manipulate and control Yahweh. Also recognize how things which God has made holy are being turned now into things which are of little value and treated kind of like sacraments, like sacred medallions of some sort. He says, I have a Levite. Because I have a Levite, God's going to do good things for me. And not too long down the road, we would read about the Israelites in the days of Samuel. They're going to say, we've got the Ark of the Covenant. Let's bring it out here to battle because then God's going to do good things for us. And then you're going to eventually hear them having the same sort of mindset towards the temple. We got the temple. Doesn't that make us the special people that God is going to always take care of? They have turned things that God had made holy and given to them for their good into the bargaining chip in which they're going to get God to do good things for them. That maybe, if we think honestly about it, might come a little bit closer to home than we feel comfortable with. I come to worship every Sunday. I'm here even on Wednesdays and in gospel meetings. I bring my kids to the VBS. I give in the collection plate. I do all these good things. Bad things shouldn't be happening to me. And maybe we would never think that God owes me because I'm doing those things. But we seem to expect that if we do the right sort of things, we will be taken care of. That's the mindset sort of behind what Micah is expressing in these chapters. And it completely fails. It minimizes the goodness of God, and it completely misunderstands the purpose of obedience. We don't obey so that God will do good things to us. We obey because God has done good things to us. Better things than we can ever imagine Him doing, He has done. We obey because He is good. It's not for us to manipulate, it's for us to surrender ourselves to. But we see the picture here. That's the idea that's taking place. We can get something from this if we have the right sorts of things in our midst. We also kind of get the idea here, and maybe it's a bigger problem than just treating these things as sacraments. A bigger problem than that is we get the idea that convenience really rules the day when it comes to worship. And it's a key thing that we'll see in these chapters, that God no longer is the definer of worship. When we worship God on our terms, we have stopped worshiping God entirely. Micah thinks I have this dwelling place where a priest is. Eventually I have a Levite. I've got things dedicated to God in it. I've got an ephod. I could go to Shiloh and do what God has commanded, but I also have it all right here at my house. Why don't I just set it up here and do these things here? Or this guy that is the Levite, Jonathan. He is similar. He could go and do what he was commanded to do. He is a Levite. He maybe cannot be a priest in the sense that he's being installed in, but he has commandments from God in which he was to fulfill as a Levite. Instead of going and doing those things, he has recognized this guy is willing to pay me to hang out with him and pretend to be his personal priest. That's certainly a lot easier than just wandering around the countryside. That is far more beneficial to me. I imagine it made him very happy. In fact, we'll see what really makes him happy in just a moment. But when worship focuses on what we want, when worship focuses on what we like or what we think is best, it fundamentally is not worship. God has set the definitions for what is worship. And it is always something that springs out from a relationship with Him. When you go back and you look at Abraham, and Abraham is wandering around in a place, he doesn't, he's left his country, his father's house, he's wandering around to a place where God will show him, and every time he has some sort of interaction with God, he creates altars. He does something to show that, God, you are important to me. But there comes a point when God starts saying, that's not what I want. Here's how you're going to worship me. This is the way that you will worship me from now on. Israel, you're going to worship me in these ways. And He gives them an entire book about it. The book of Leviticus is filled with very specific things. This is what I want you to do. That hasn't changed to this very day. God continues to be the definer of worship. When He says that this is what I desire, we might think to ourselves that there's things that we might think would be better than that. We would think that it is better if we were to conduct worship differently than what we have maybe just seen traditionally done. Oh, it would be so much better if we allowed a woman to bring the message, because we're talking about, we're giving a message about oppression. And certainly there has been 100% evidence of this, that women have suffered and been oppressed in the past. And so what better voice to give that message? That would be so powerful. And the music that we could play with that and the songs that we could sing would generate so much emotion. People are going to respond. In fact, people will respond. People will absolutely come to that. A church like that will grow. But are we worshiping God? And God has said, what I desire is for you to sing and make melody in your heart. And God has said is that I desire a role for men and a role for women. And I picked those out for a purpose. And I made those for a reason. Because they glorify me. They don't glorify what we think would be best. They don't glorify how we think it would be better this way. They glorify what I have said, this is what I want. When God is no longer defining worship, then we are no longer worshiping God. But what has started with Micah, this individual and some of his family, is very quickly to spread to even more. Why don't you read with me chapter 18? It's a little bit longer reading, but we're going to go ahead and read the whole thing and make a few notes towards the end of this chapter as we try to draw all the things that are going on that day together. In those days there was no king of Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in, for until that day an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession among the tribes of Israel. Just a translation note. Some of your translations may not say the inheritance had not been allotted to them. That's because the inheritance had 100% been allotted to them. It was allotted to them in the days of Joshua. The problem is not that it wasn't allotted, and that word that's translated there as allotted probably is better translated, it had not fallen to them. Instead, they had fallen to the people that they were to cast out. They went in to take their land, and they didn't take any of it, and they ran out of town. So continuing on, the sons of Dan sent from their family 5 men out of their whole number, valiant men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and to search it. And they said to them, go search the land. They came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. All right, again, let me pause. I apologize. I said we're going to read the whole thing, but I forgot to tell you all one very important thing that I really wanted you to do. Now I feel silly. I think there's something fascinating going on in chapter 18. I think what we see a picture of here is a brand new conquest of Canaan. So as I'm reading through this, and we've already read some of it, maybe you'll pick up on as I'm saying this, try to see if you find any aspects, any moments, anything that happens in chapter 18 that also happened in the conquest of Canaan as Israel was coming out of the wilderness and beginning to come in to Canaan. So we've learned the Danites don't have an inheritance. They haven't got it yet. And so they're going to send some spies, that might stand out to us, to go and search out the land. Verse 3. When they were near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite, and they turned aside there and said to him, who brought you here, and what are you doing in this place? What do you have here? He said to them, thus and so has Micah done to me, and he has hired me, and I have become his priest. And they said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether our way on which we are going will be prosperous. The priest said to them, go in peace, your way in which you are going has the Lord's approval. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people who were in it living in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure, for there was no ruler humiliating them for anything in the land. And they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. When they came back to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers said to them, what do you report? They said, arise, and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And will you sit still? Do not delay to go to enter to possess the land. When you enter, you will come to a secure people with spacious land, for God has given it into your hand, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth. Then the family of the Danites from Zorah and from Eshtaol, 600 men armed with weapons of war, set out. They went up and camped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah, and therefore they called that place Mahana Dan, which means the camp of Dan, to this day. Behold, it was west of Kiriath Jearim. They passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Now the 5 men who went to spy out the country of Laish said to their kinsmen, do you know that there are in these houses an ephod and household idols and a graven image and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you should do. They turned aside there and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, to the house of Micah, and they asked him of his welfare. The 600 men armed with weapons of war who were of the sons of Dan stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up, entered there, and took the graven image, the ephod, the household idols, the molten image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house, and they took the graven image, ephod, household idols, and the molten image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? They said to him, be silent, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us to be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to the tribe and family in Israel? The priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and household idols and graven image and went among the people. Then they turned and departed, put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. And when they had gone some distance from the house of Micah, the men who were in their houses near Micah's house assembled, overtook the sons of Dan, and they cried to the sons of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, what is the matter with you that you have assembled together? Micah says, you have taken away my gods which I have made, and the priest, and have gone away, and what do I have besides? How can you say to me, what is the matter with you? The sons of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, or else fierce men will fall upon you, and you will lose your life with the lives of your household. So the sons of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Then they took what Micah had made, and the priests who had belonged to him, and came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword. They burned the city with fire. There was no one to deliver them, because it was far from Sidon. They had no dealings with anyone, and it was in the valley, which is near Beth Rehob. And they rebuilt the city, and they lived in it. They called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. The sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, or maybe the son of Moses you might have. He and his sons were priests to the tribe of Danites until the day of captivity of the land. So they set up themselves Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. It might be that you noticed some of the things that went on there that were very similar. We pointed out the spies going into the land. Spies going in and spying out the land, very similar to the conquest when they sent in 12 men to spy the land out. They come back and what do they, when they come back, what do they tell? They say that the land is very good. It's a good land for us. Now some differences. In the first case with Israel, God was the one that told them to do this. But with Dan, this seems to have no divine initiative behind it. This is just the plans of the tribe of Dan. Also, when they went in and saw that the land was good in Israel, the first time, what was it that made the land good? It was God. God had said that I have all of this prepared for you. When you're going to go into a land, it doesn't have need for you to do anything. So it was theologically connected that God was leading them into it. That's what made it good. That's not the case here. This is good because it has practical purposes. It's spacious land. We're not going to be confined to small cities anymore. We can move out and we can start our families here. It's got all the things that we might want to do that. And also, it's got people that are weak. They're ready for us to come and just take them over. Now, that's another contrast to the time when the Israelites came into the land. They said, that's got giants in it. We are like grasshoppers in their size. It's cities with fortifications to the ceiling. They were afraid to go into the land because of the people. Dan has boldness to go into the land because of the people. And it's interesting that the people that they are talking about, the people of Laish, are either a sister city to the region of Sidon, or maybe, as we mentioned at the beginning of this, they're in a covenant relationship. It could be that they are under their own suzerain relationship with Sidon. Some things about that would be interesting. If they are in a covenant relationship with Sidon, they are so faithful to them that Sidon doesn't feel like they need to put troops close by to keep the order and to keep things, if they're going to fail to do the things that are stipulated in their covenant agreement, they don't feel like they need to put people close by to try to enforce that. So it kind of leaves us with a question. When the conquest of Canaan begins, we see Israel being very victorious. But now we're left wondering, is this a victory for Israel or is this a victory for Canaan? It appears like Laish is more Israel than the Israelites. And it appears like the Danites are more Canaan than Laish even is. And I think that's really the picture of what's going on here. One commentator noted, if you came to Laish the day before the Israelites conquered it, and then you came back a couple days later, the only real difference you would recognize is some of the buildings look different and the language has changed. But the people that inhabited it were very much the same. Canaan was still living in Laish in the days that Dan captured it. Now notice what they do with Micah and the Levite through this story. So having discovered this, somehow they know the Levite, and they're on their way for their northern conquest. They come up with a plan, and they tell him, they say, guys, on the way we saw this guy, and inside that house is a ephod, and our household idols, and our graven images, and our molten images. So you need to consider what we're going to do about that when we get there. And the obvious answer to that, under the Mosaic law, would be you take your 600 men of war and you go in and you take it all out and you burn all of it and you execute everybody in Micah's house that's been involved in this. This is a serious offense under the law of Moses. What they have done is deserving of the death penalty. But when they get there, they say, you know what we need to do with that? We need to take all that with us. Because we're going to be able to use that where we're going. We need a place to worship. And so they're going to gather all that up. The priest says, what are you doing? And they make this statement to him, hey, it's going to be better for you. Wouldn't it be better for you to be the priest over a whole tribe as opposed to just this one man? And especially our young people, I want you to know this makes him glad. We should maybe not be glad whenever things that appear to be blessings are going to separate us from the Word of God. So he starts out as a guy with no plan, no purpose, just kind of traveling about, and somebody finds him and goes, hey, I want you to be a priest, something that he could never do. I never was going to get a chance to be a priest. This guy's going to make me a priest, and he's going to pay me, and he's going to give me clothes, and he's going to just give me a house. I guess it's great. My life just got a whole lot better. And then now these guys show up and they say, no, not just a priest. We'll make you the high priest, right? You're going to be the priest of the whole nation. So that's kind of like the high priest. His life, the trajectory looks like it's on the up. But when the blessings of today put us in opposition to God, they will turn to dust in our mouths. We will rue the day that we partook of them. And that is certainly going to be the case with Micah. Micah seems to think, I have somehow turned this curse around that my mom has placed. Look how good things are. Look at him at the end of this. He is cursed. The curse that she uttered at the beginning of this story is taking place in his life. He goes home with nothing. He has lost everything that he has built up. But there's two accounts I want to draw as we draw this to a close. Two statements that are the saddest of these stories, these two chapters. The first one I've already sort of spoiled, and that is that we learn the Levite's name is Jonathan, the grandson of Moses. But here's why that's sad. That implies that it took only 2 generations. It took only 2 generations to get from people that march into Canaan with God out front, saying, we will do your will and have victory and defeat the land, and God is glorified and things go well. 2 generations from that to the disaster that we just read taking place with the tribes of Dan. If your grandfather or grandmother are Christians today, I'm talking about you. That's the time span. That's the time span between what we've seen. You can think about just how quickly this has taken place. If your grandchildren are here today thinking about or have become Christians, that's the time span. So quickly, in just 2 generations, the people of God have devolved into something that doesn't reflect Yahweh in any measurable manner. Yes, is it built on things that He had established? True. But it looks exactly like the world that they've come into. It's completely paganized. And if it can happen to them, we must recognize the truth that can happen to us as well. It gives us a great emphasis on training up the next generations. But the other sad statement is this. Dan renames the city after their father. They go in, they change the name of Laish to Dan. There's a lot of things in their life that is similar to the Samson story. So you'll recall the Philistines when Samson gives the riddle and they can't get the answer, they go to his wife and they say, if you don't tell us the answer, we're going to kill you, and we're going to kill your father's household, or kill everybody in it. Well, what do they say when Micah shows up and says, why have you done all this? They say, we're going to kill you, we're going to kill your whole household, kill everybody in it. They're almost verbatim the Philistines there. But here they're almost verbatim Samson. When Samson is about to die of thirst and God provides him with a spring, he calls the spring of the requester, the spring of the petitioner. He names the spring after himself. And Dan has done the same thing here. We've taken this town, we asked for God's advice at the beginning of this, even though we did it through pagan ways, and they said that God was going to bless us, but we go in and we take it and we don't try to glorify God. Instead, not only do we name it after ourselves, we set up a false cultic worship center. And that worship center remains there, and says in verse 30 and 31, until the captivity of the land, all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. And there's a question that comes from that. How long was this site there? It may be that it was there until the day that Assyria captured the northern kingdom of Israel. Or it may be something that was more localized. In the days of Samuel, Samuel chapter 4, the ark is going to be taken out of Shiloh and it's going to be captured by the Philistines. Psalm chapter 78 is going to certainly make it sound like during those days something happens in Shiloh. Either way, the point is, when all of this takes place, a long period of time has lapsed where Dan has this cultic worship center. Why do we need to remember that? Well, to answer that, I want us to follow the chain one more time of what has taken place. Very quickly, an individual steals money from his mom. Later, he becomes the leader of an idolatrous worship cult. He grows it with a powerful figure who represents holiness. That cultic worship is transformed and adopted into a regional religion in the tribe of Dan. And then some 300 years later, a man by the name of Jeroboam is going to come in and say, here's a golden calf. Where do I put it? Oh, I know. I'll put it right here in Dan. The cultic regional religion morphs into a national religion of the northern kingdom of Israel. Part of what 17 and 18 is telling us is small sins have huge impacts. You ever stolen something? Thought maybe I'd get a hand or something. No. Nobody wants to admit to that. Well, I have. I've stolen stuff. When I was younger, I remember we were at a store and I swiped something on the from the shelf area, and I felt really, really bad. And I showed it to Mom. We were camping and take it back to the camp store. It was embarrassing. Never in my life would I have imagined that swiping that candy bar or whatever it was could lead to an entire nation crumbling in religion. But that's exactly what happens here. Yes, it's more expensive than a candy bar, 1,100 pieces of silver, but just some guy in Ephraim stealing some money from mom will eventually lead to a king establishing a golden calf that all of the northern kingdom of Israel will bow down to and worship. Don't think that your small sins don't matter. All of this happens when there is no king in the land. All of this happens because there is no king, so everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. When we do what is right in our own eyes, worship is perverted. When we do what is right in our own eyes, the weak, think Laish, the weak are destroyed by the strong, and sin prevails. Thank God. That's the message of the narrator, by the way. Thank God we finally got a king. Because when we didn't have a king, it was a wreck. And you go, well, which king are we talking about? Saul wasn't much better. No, we're not talking about Saul. We're not even talking about David. I wonder if what we're truly seeing from the eyes of the narrator is borne out better in Isaiah 9. For a child will be born to us. A son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. Praise God that we finally have a king. Praise God that Jesus has come, because the King of righteousness is here. So worship doesn't have to be perverted. We can be set straight again on what it is that God desires, and we can be made to worship Him purely with clean hearts. But whenever we come back to Judges later, we will also recognize how true the second part of that is. When there is no king, there is no justice. I'm sure the people of Laish would understand that message. Praise be to God that He has given us a king that brings justice. I'm not for sure. I'm not for sure how you're going to think about this holiday season. And I really don't care too much. I think every one of us can agree that it is a great blessing that Jesus Christ has come into the world. Praise God that we have a King who was born to us. That the government can rest, the powers of the judicial powers of the world can rest upon His shoulder. That righteousness and justice can be brought in because of His life. And that we can have a hope of reigning with Him eternally because of His death. Maybe during this holiday season, we might not recognize that this is truly the time that anything pointing us towards Jesus' birth historically. We might be able to join in with the rest of the world at this moment and find an opportunity to say, thanks be to God for the Son that is born to us. If you are here today and you recognize, I have not been living a righteous life. Maybe it is that I live as if there's no king in this world. I do what's right in my own eyes. Learn from the lessons of Micah and Dan. The choices that you're making today will impact your future and the lives of so many who come after you. Maybe it is that we've not been making the right sort of decisions that will lead the next generation to stand for God. Maybe it is that we have neglected what He desires in worship. But whatever it is, we need to recognize there is a place where those stand before God to petition on our behalf. Just like the people in Micah's day, there is a shrine. There is a temple. There is a house where we can come into the presence of God and we can be forgiven. If you're here today and you're feeling like that, you need to know as well, there is a shrine today. There is a temple. It is not made with hands, and it is not fed by the blood of bulls and goats, but it has been established in all of us through Jesus Christ and is fixed on His blood. If we can assist you in coming to Him and finding forgiveness of your sins, or returning to Him to stand boldly and to teach His truth, whatever it is we can do to assist you, let's talk together as we stand and sing.